Control is an illusion that most people spend their entire lives chasing. They try to control outcomes, other people, circumstances, the future, the past, the weather, the economy, the opinions others hold about them. They exhaust themselves attempting to manage variables that were never theirs to manage, and then they wonder why they feel powerless. But there is one form of control that is not illusory, one domain where your authority is absolute if you choose to exercise it, your own mind. The question is not whether you can control your mind. The question is whether you will do the work required to build that control, or whether you will continue to be a passenger in your own consciousness. The Stoics built an entire philosophy around this singular insight. You cannot control the world, but you can control your relationship to it. You cannot determine what happens, but you can determine what it means. You cannot choose your circumstances, but you can choose your response. This is not motivational rhetoric designed to make you feel better. This is a precise description of the boundary between your power and your powerlessness. Everything outside this boundary is not yours to control and will cause suffering if you try. Everything inside this boundary is yours to master, and mastering it is the only path to genuine freedom. Marcus Aurelius understood this with a clarity born from impossible circumstances. He did not want to be emperor. He did not want to spend years fighting wars on distant frontiers. He did not want to deal with political betrayals, plague, personal losses, and the constant demands of empire. Yet these were his circumstances, utterly beyond his control. What remained within his control was his mind, his judgments, his principles, his responses, his character. So he built a fortress there, a citadel of reason that no external force could breach. Every night, he wrote reminders to himself about what he could and could not control, about where his power ended and fate began, about how to maintain his humanity in inhuman circumstances. This fortress was not built in a day. It was constructed through years of daily practice, through constant examination, through relentless training of attention and judgment. The Stoic mind is not a natural state. It is an achievement, a work of architecture that must be designed, built, and maintained against constant forces of erosion. Your untrained mind is chaos, reactive, emotional, scattered, enslaved to impulse and circumstance. Your trained mind can be order, responsive rather than reactive, rational without being cold, focused without being rigid, free even in chains. But we must be brutally honest about what building this kind of mind requires. It requires acknowledging that your current relationship with your own consciousness is probably one of near total ignorance. You do not know why you think what you think. You do not understand why certain triggers provoke certain responses. You cannot predict when your attention will hold and when it will scatter. You are largely unconscious of the judgments that determine your emotional states. You live in your mind the way most people live in their cities, occupying the space without understanding its structure, using its functions without knowing how they work, comfortable with familiarity but ignorant of mechanics. The Stoic project is to become conscious, not in some mystical sense, but in a precise psychological sense, to understand the mechanisms of your own mind well enough to operate it deliberately rather than being operated by it. This requires developing what Epictetus called the ability to examine impressions, to catch thoughts before they become judgments, judgments before they become emotions, emotions before they become actions. Most people move through this chain unconsciously and automatically. Something happens, they have a thought about it, the thought generates an emotion, the emotion drives a behavior, and only afterward do they wonder why they acted that way. The Stoic learns to insert consciousness into this chain, to slow it down, to examine each step and decide whether to proceed or redirect. Consider what happens in a typical moment of reactivity. Someone criticizes you. Within milliseconds, before you are even aware of thinking, your mind has generated a judgment. This criticism is unjust. This person is attacking me. I am being wronged. This judgment generates an emotional response: anger, defensiveness, hurt. This emotion drives behavior. You respond harshly, you withdraw, you ruminate for hours. None of this was chosen. It happened automatically, like a reflex. And because it was automatic, you experience it as inevitable, as something that was done to you rather than something you did to yourself. The Stoic mind operates differently. The criticism arrives. There is a pause, not a long pause, just a moment of space between stimulus and response. In that space, examination happens. What actually occurred? Someone offered negative feedback. Is this feedback accurate? If yes, it is valuable information that can help me improve. If no, it is simply their opinion, which cannot harm me unless I give it that power. Do I need to respond? If yes, what response serves my principles? If no, I can simply let this pass without engagement. This process takes seconds once trained, but it transforms the entire experience. What could have been hours of suffering becomes a moment of information processing. This is what the Stoics meant by control. Not control over whether criticism arrives, but control over what you make of it. Not control over other people's opinions, but control over whether those opinions disturb your peace. Not control over external events, but control over the internal judgments that determine whether external events cause suffering. This control is absolute and available to everyone, but it must be built systematically through specific practices executed consistently over time. Seneca wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality, that most of our misery comes not from what actually happens, but from our catastrophic interpretations of what might happen or what has happened. The mind, left untrained, is a factory of suffering, generating anxiety about the future, regret about the past, and dissatisfaction with the present. It is never content with what is because it is always comparing what is to some imagined alternative. It is never at peace because it is always focused on something outside its control. This is not a bug in human psychology, it is the default state. Building a Stoic mind means overriding this default through deliberate practice. The blueprint for this construction has 8 foundational elements. These are not suggestions or inspirational ideas. They are structural requirements, the equivalent of foundation, walls, and roof in physical architecture. Without them, the mind remains vulnerable to every storm of circumstance and emotion. With them, gradually and through consistent effort, you build the kind of psychological fortress that Marcus Aurelius inhabited, a place of calm reason that remains steady regardless of what chaos swirls outside. The first foundational element is the practice of dichotomy. This is the Stoic discipline of sorting all things into 2 categories: what is up to you and what is not up to you. This sounds simple until you attempt it rigorously. Most people have never clearly identified what is actually within their control. They believe they control outcomes when they only control effort. They believe they control other people's responses when they only control their own behavior. They believe they control their reputation when they only control their character. This confusion causes endless suffering because they are attempting to manage variables they cannot manage while neglecting the variables they can. Epictetus was obsessive about this practice. He would tell his students to examine everything that happened to them and ask, "Is this up to me?" Your body gets sick, not up to you. Your response to sickness, up to you. Someone insults you, not up to you. Whether that insult disturbs your peace, up to you. You lose your money, not up to you. Your character in the face of loss, up to you. The list goes on infinitely, and the discipline is to make this distinction automatically, instantly, in every situation. When something happens, before you react, you categorize it. If it is not up to you, you accept it without resistance. If it is up to you, you engage your full agency. This practice alone, if executed consistently, will eliminate the majority of your psychological suffering. Most anxiety comes from trying to control things outside your control. Most frustration comes from expecting outcomes you cannot determine. Most disappointment comes from demanding that reality conform to your preferences. When you clearly understand what is yours and what is not, these forms of suffering lose their foundation. You stop arguing with reality. You stop demanding that things be different than they are. You accept what is not yours to change and focus all your energy on what is. The second foundational element is the discipline of judgment management. The Stoics understood that events themselves are neutral. They have no inherent emotional charge. What creates emotion is the judgment you make about the event. Rain is not bad. Your judgment that rain ruins your plans makes you upset. Traffic is not frustrating. Your judgment that you should not have to sit in traffic creates frustration. Loss is not tragic. Your judgment that you should not have lost creates grief. This is not to say emotions are wrong or should be eliminated. It is to say that emotions are created by judgments, and judgments can be examined and potentially changed. Marcus Aurelius practiced this constantly. When something unpleasant happened, he would remind himself, "This event is neutral. My judgment about it determines whether I suffer. Can I choose a different judgment?" If someone betrayed him, instead of judging it as a terrible wrong, he would judge it as that person acting according to their nature, which was outside his control. If he faced military defeat, instead of judging it as catastrophic, he would judge it as an opportunity to practice virtue in adversity. This was not positive thinking or self-delusion. This was strategic judgment selection based on what interpretation would allow him to maintain equanimity and function effectively. The practice begins with catching your automatic judgments. Throughout the day, you experience things that trigger immediate evaluative responses. This is good, this is bad, this is terrible, this is wonderful. Most of these judgments are unconscious and unexamined. You inherited them from culture, absorbed them from environment, generated them from conditioning. The Stoic learns to notice these judgments as they arise and ask, "Is this judgment helpful? Is it accurate? Is it based on what is actually up to me? If not, can I choose a more useful judgment?" This does not mean lying to yourself or pretending bad things are good. It means distinguishing between what actually happened and your interpretation of what happened. Your business failed, that is a fact. Your judgment that this failure means you are worthless, that is an interpretation, and it is both false and harmful. Your relationship ended, that is a fact. Your judgment that you will never find love again, that is speculation presented as certainty, and it creates suffering that has no basis in present reality. The Stoic learns to strip away interpretive layers and deal with facts, then deliberately choose interpretations that serve their well-being and function without distorting truth. The third foundational element is the practice of negative visualization, though this must be understood correctly to avoid the trap of pessimism. The Stoics did not practice negative visualization to make themselves miserable. They practiced it to prepare themselves psychologically for loss and to increase their appreciation for what they currently have. Each morning, the Stoic would contemplate that today might be the last day of their life, that people they love might die, that possessions might be lost, that reputation might be destroyed. Not dwelling morbidly, but acknowledging soberly. This practice serves two functions. First, it removes the shock of loss when it comes. If you have mentally rehearsed losing something, the actual loss is less devastating because you already processed some of the emotional impact in advance. Modern psychology calls this stress inoculation, and research shows it is highly effective at building resilience. Second, It makes you grateful for what you have now. When you contemplate that your child might die, you hug them differently tonight. When you imagine losing your health, you appreciate your current vitality. When you consider that all things are temporary and on loan rather than owned, you hold them more lightly and lose them more gracefully. Seneca practiced this extensively. He would imagine losing his wealth, his status, his freedom. He would contemplate exile, imprisonment, death. This was not masochism. This was preparation. When Nero eventually turned on him, when he faced death, he was not unprepared. He had rehearsed this moment mentally hundreds of times. The reality was no worse than the rehearsal, and so he met it with equanimity. This is the power of negative visualization. It strips future catastrophes of their power to devastate you because you have already integrated their possibility into your worldview. The fourth foundational element is the discipline of voluntary discomfort. The Stoic mind is built not just through thought but through physical practice that trains the nervous system to tolerate adversity. Seneca took cold baths. Marcus Aurelius slept on hard ground. Epictetus, even after gaining his freedom, lived simply and rejected luxury. They understood that comfort makes you fragile, that a nervous system accustomed only to pleasure will collapse when discomfort arrives. The person who has never been uncomfortable cannot handle discomfort when it is inevitable. This practice is not about suffering for suffering's sake. It is about building psychological resilience through controlled exposure to discomfort. When you voluntarily choose cold showers, hard exercise, fasting, simplicity, you teach your body and mind that discomfort is tolerable, that you can function effectively even when conditions are not ideal. This training transfers to other domains. When you face emotional discomfort, physical pain, social adversity, your nervous system already has experience with discomfort and does not panic. You have proved to yourself repeatedly that you can endure, and this proof becomes unshakable confidence. Modern science validates this ancient practice through research on hormesis and stress adaptation. Controlled exposure to stressors makes organisms more resilient to future stress. The muscles you stress with weight training become stronger. The immune system you expose to pathogens becomes more robust. The nervous system you expose to controlled discomfort becomes more adaptable. The Stoics understood this intuitively and applied it systematically. They did not wait for life to impose hardship. They imposed it on themselves deliberately, in doses they could control, to build capacity for handling doses they could not control. The fifth foundational element is the practice of attention training, which we explored in depth in an earlier discussion, but must include here as fundamental to building a Stoic mind. Your mind goes where your attention goes. If your attention is constantly captured by trivialities, your mind will be trivial. If your attention is constantly scattered, your mind will be chaotic. If your attention constantly focuses on what you cannot control, your mind will be anxious and frustrated. The ability to direct attention deliberately and sustain it on chosen objects is perhaps the single most important skill in building a Stoic mind. Epictetus taught attention as the foundation of all other practices. Before you can examine your judgments, you must be able to notice them. Before you can choose your response, you must be able to create space between stimulus and reaction. Before you can live according to principle, you must be able to hold those principles in consciousness long enough to apply them. All of this requires attention that you command rather than attention that is commanded by circumstances. The untrained mind's attention is pulled by whatever is loudest, brightest, most emotionally charged. The trained mind's attention goes where it is directed and stays there until redirected deliberately. The sixth foundational element is the practice of role clarity and duty identification. The Stoics believed that every person has specific roles and duties that arise from their nature and circumstances. You are a human being, which carries certain duties related to your rational nature. You may be a parent, a professional, a citizen, a friend. Each role brings duties. The Stoic mind achieves clarity about these roles and commits to fulfilling their requirements regardless of inclination or mood. This clarity provides structure that prevents the mind from drifting into purposelessness or being pulled by every passing desire. Marcus Aurelius would remind himself each morning of his role and its duties. He was emperor, which meant he had obligations to his people, his armies, his administration. He was a philosopher, which meant he had obligations to pursue wisdom and live according to reason. He was a human being, which meant he had obligations to all of humanity as members of a universal community. These roles were not burdens to him, they were sources of meaning and direction. When he felt unmotivated or tired, his roles provided structure. When he was uncertain what to do, his duties provided answers. When he was tempted to take the easy path, his commitments held him accountable. This practice requires sitting down and honestly identifying your roles and the duties that come with them. Not what you wish your roles were, but what they actually are. Not the duties you think sound impressive, but the ones that are actually yours to fulfill. Once identified, these duties become your reference point for decision-making. When you are uncertain whether to do something, you ask, does this serve my roles and duties? If yes, you do it regardless of whether you feel like it. If no, you decline it regardless of whether it seems appealing. This creates a kind of algorithmic clarity that the untrained mind lacks entirely. The seventh foundational element is the practice of philosophical study as daily nourishment. The Stoic mind is not built once and then left alone. It requires constant reinforcement because the default pull toward emotional reactivity, distorted judgment, and loss of perspective is strong. Every day presents new challenges that test your principles. Every day your attention drifts toward what you cannot control. Every day you must return to fundamentals, and this return requires having those fundamentals readily available in consciousness. The Stoics read and reflected on philosophy daily, not as academic exercise but as psychological medicine. Seneca called his philosophical reading a form of therapy, a way of treating the soul's diseases. Marcus Aurelius wrote his meditations as daily reminders to himself of truths he tended to forget under pressure. Epictetus had his students memorize key principles so they would be available instantly in moments of crisis. They understood that knowing something intellectually is not the same as having it integrated deeply enough to access under stress. Your practice must include this daily renewal. Read Stoic philosophy or other wisdom literature each morning before the day's chaos begins. Let these ideas settle into your consciousness. Reflect on how they apply to your current challenges. Write about your struggles with implementing them. Discuss them with others who take this work seriously. The mind that is fed only by its own thoughts will quickly become malnourished. You need input from minds that have thought deeper and longer than you have, that have faced challenges you have not yet faced, that have achieved the kind of wisdom you are building toward. The eighth foundational element is the practice of evening examination. Just as the morning should begin with philosophical preparation, the evening should end with philosophical review. Seneca described his nightly practice of examining the day, not to punish himself for failures, but to learn from them. He would ask himself, where did I maintain my principles today? Where did I lose them? When was I reactive rather than responsive? When did I waste attention on things outside my control? When did I serve my duties? When did I neglect them? What can I learn from today that will make me wiser tomorrow? This practice transforms experience into wisdom. Without reflection, you simply repeat patterns without learning from them. With reflection, every day becomes a lesson. Every failure becomes data. Every success becomes something you can consciously replicate. Over months and years, this nightly practice creates a detailed understanding of your own psychology, your triggers, your patterns, your strengths, your vulnerabilities. This self-knowledge is power because it allows you to design your life and responses around your actual capacities rather than who you wish you were. Marcus Aurelius conducted this examination through his writing. His meditations are essentially the record of his nightly self-examination, his attempts to understand his reactions, his efforts to realign himself with his principles after losing them during the day. Reading his private thoughts, you see not a perfect sage but a struggling human being who used the practice of examination to gradually become wiser. He did not expect perfection. He expected progress through honest assessment and continuous adjustment. These 8 elements, dichotomy practice, judgment management, negative visualization, voluntary discomfort, attention training, role clarity, daily study, and evening examination, form the complete blueprint for building a Stoic mind. None of them is optional. Each one serves a specific structural function, and weakness in any area will compromise the whole. But here is what makes this blueprint both empowering and demanding. These are all practices, not theories. You cannot build a Stoic mind by understanding these concepts intellectually. You can only build it by executing these practices daily, consistently, for months and years until they become internalized. This is where most people fail. They read about Stoicism, they find the ideas compelling, they agree that this is how they should think and operate. But agreement is not practice. Understanding is not execution. The gap between knowing what you should do and actually doing it is where most philosophical projects die. The Stoics were ruthlessly practical about this gap. They did not trust knowledge alone. They trusted only habituated practice, only responses that had been trained so deeply that they became automatic. Consider what this means for your own development. You cannot simply decide to have better judgment. You must practice examining judgments thousands of times until the examination becomes reflexive. You cannot simply decide to focus better. You must train attention daily until sustained focus becomes your default rather than your aspiration. You cannot simply decide to tolerate discomfort. You must expose yourself to voluntary discomfort regularly until your nervous system recalibrates what it considers unbearable. The Stoic mind is built the way athletic ability is built, through progressive, consistent practice that gradually raises your baseline capacity. Let us examine what life looks like once you have built this kind of mind, because the benefits are profound and extend into every domain of existence. The person with a Stoic mind experiences the same external circumstances as everyone else: loss, disappointment, betrayal, illness, failure, death. What changes is not what happens, but how what happens affects them. Events that would devastate the untrained mind are processed by the trained mind as information to respond to rather than catastrophes to collapse under. This is not because the Stoic mind is cold or emotionless. It is because the Stoic mind has learned to separate what is actually happening from catastrophic interpretation of what is happening. When loss comes, the Stoic mind acknowledges it honestly but does not add layers of suffering through resistance or interpretation. Something was lost. That is the fact. The judgment that this loss is unbearable, that life cannot continue without this thing, that you are being unfairly targeted by fate, these are interpretations that create additional suffering. The Stoic experiences loss but does not experience the suffering that comes from fighting reality or creating stories about what the loss means. They grieve if grief is appropriate, but they do not drown in stories about how things should have been different. When criticism or insult arrives, the Stoic mind examines it for truth without becoming defensive. If the criticism is valid, it is valuable feedback regardless of how it was delivered. If the criticism is invalid, it is simply someone's opinion, which has no power to harm you unless you grant it that power. The untrained mind reacts to criticism with automatic defensiveness, hurt, or counterattack. The trained mind pauses, evaluates, and responds based on principle rather than emotion. This does not mean never feeling hurt. It means not being controlled by that hurt, not letting it drive behavior that you will later regret. When facing difficult decisions, the Stoic mind has clarity that the untrained mind lacks. The untrained mind is pulled by competing desires, conflicting emotions, fear of outcomes it cannot control. It agonizes, procrastinates, seeks endless advice, and second-guesses itself constantly. The Stoic mind refers to its principles and roles. What does virtue require in this situation? What do my duties demand? What is actually within my control here? The decision becomes simpler not because the situation is less complex, but because the criteria for decision are clear. You choose what aligns with your principles and accept whatever consequences follow, knowing you did what was yours to do. When success arrives, the Stoic mind receives it with equanimity rather than euphoria. Success is preferred but not necessary for your worth. It is welcome but not the foundation of your identity. This protects you from the fragility that comes from tying your peace to outcomes you cannot guarantee. The person who is euphoric in success will be devastated in failure because their emotional state is hostage to circumstances. The person who maintains equanimity in both success and failure remains stable regardless of external variables. They can enjoy success without becoming attached to it, which means they can lose it without being destroyed by the loss. This psychological stability has practical benefits that extend far beyond personal peace. The Stoic mind is more effective precisely because it is not destabilized by circumstances. When crisis comes, the untrained mind panics, freezes, or reacts impulsively. The Stoic mind remains calm, assesses the situation clearly, and responds strategically. When others are emotional, the Stoic provides ballast. When chaos reigns, the Stoic provides direction. This is not because the Stoic lacks emotion, but because their emotions are responsive to reality rather than to catastrophic interpretation of reality. In relationships, the Stoic mind creates a kind of secure presence that is rare and valuable. You are not needy because your peace does not depend on others' approval. You are not controlling because you accept that others' choices are not yours to manage. You are not unstable because your emotional state is not hostage to others' moods or behaviors. This makes you both easier to be around and more trustworthy. People know that you will not collapse in crisis, that you will not become reactive under pressure, that your care for them is genuine rather than a strategy to get them to meet your needs. In work, the Stoic mind provides focus and resilience that compounds over time into exceptional capability. You can engage deeply with difficult problems because setbacks do not discourage you. They are simply information about what does not work. You can maintain effort over long periods because your motivation comes from duty and principle rather than from feeling inspired. You can handle criticism and failure without becoming defensive or giving up because you understand that outcomes are not entirely within your control and therefore cannot define your worth. But we must be honest about the costs of building this kind of mind, because there are costs. The process requires sustained discomfort as you override your default psychological patterns. It requires accepting truths about yourself that are not flattering, that you have been reactive, that your judgments have been distorted, that you have wasted attention on trivialities, that you have failed to live according to your own stated values. It requires the discipline to practice daily even when you do not feel motivated, even when progress seems imperceptible, even when you are surrounded by people who do not understand what you are trying to build and mock your efforts. There is also the cost of increased awareness. Once you begin to examine your mind systematically, you cannot stop noticing its dysfunction. You see your automatic judgments, your reactive patterns, your attention failures, your violations of your own principles. This awareness is necessary for change, but it is uncomfortable. The person who never examines their mind can remain unconscious of their patterns and therefore not troubled by them. The person committed to building a Stoic mind must develop the capacity to witness their own failures without becoming discouraged by them, to see clearly without losing hope, to accept current dysfunction as the starting point rather than the destination. The path forward requires commitment to long-term practice. You will not build a Stoic mind in weeks or months. This is years of daily execution of the 8 foundational practices. Years of catching your automatic judgments and replacing them with examined ones. Years of directing your attention deliberately thousands of times per day. Years of voluntary discomfort, negative visualization, role fulfillment, philosophical study, and evening examination. The mind is not reformed quickly. It is reformed gradually through accumulated repetition that eventually becomes internalized habit. But here is what makes this commitment worthwhile. Every day of practice makes the next day easier. Every time you catch a judgment, the next time is slightly faster. Every time you redirect attention, the redirection becomes smoother. Every time you choose your response rather than react automatically, the choice becomes more natural. The Stoic mind is built slowly, but it is built cumulatively. You do not have to achieve perfection. You only have to practice consistently, and the practice itself creates the transformation. Marcus Aurelius never claimed to have perfected his mind. Reading his private writings, you see someone who struggled constantly, who lost his temper, who felt discouraged, who had to remind himself daily of truths he kept forgetting. But you also see someone who practiced anyway, who examined himself honestly, who returned to his principles after losing them, who built gradually over decades the kind of mind that could rule an empire without being corrupted by it, that could face plague and war and betrayal without losing its humanity. This is what is possible through committed practice, not perfection, but profound development beyond where you currently are. The blueprint is complete. The practices are clear. The question is whether you will execute them. Most people will not. Most people will read these ideas, find them interesting, agree that this is how they should operate, and then continue living exactly as they have been living. Their minds will remain untrained, reactive, scattered, and enslaved to circumstances. They will continue to suffer in ways that are avoidable through practice they are unwilling to execute. This is not judgment. It is simply observation of what happens when understanding is not translated into action. But some people will take this blueprint and build with it. They will begin the daily practices. They will catch their first judgment and examine it. They will redirect their first wandering attention. They will impose their first voluntary discomfort. They will write their first evening examination. And they will continue day after day, through difficulty and doubt, through slow progress and frequent failure, building gradually the kind of mind that the ancient Stoics built, that remains as relevant and powerful today as it was 2,000 years ago. If you are ready to build this mind, to commit to the practices regardless of how slowly progress comes, to accept that this is years of work with no shortcuts or easy alternatives, then walk this path with us. Subscribe to Beyond the Logos, and together we will practice the ancient disciplines that transform the mind from chaos to order, from reactivity to sovereignty, from weakness to strength. The work is demanding. The rewards are absolute. Begin today.